From CRI Simple Numbers, this is Profitability Playbook, the Simple Numbers Podcast, a podcast for those who champion market growth and anchor the nation's economy, small businesses, and entrepreneurs.
Hi, hey there. Welcome to another episode of the Simple Numbers Profitability Playbook Podcast. I'm Mike Maxson. That's Brandon Gray. And ready to kick off another week on this Monday morning and a rainy one here in Alabama. So let's say Brandon survived the storms out where he's at. So remember, we talk about it. Brandon lives out in the woods, everybody. Okay. Like when you talk Alabama, that's where Brandon lives. And so we always are glad to see him after storm because
as we would say in Center Star, it came a toad strangler last night, early this week. So
yeah, it's always good to see that he's survived the thunder. So anyways, we're gonna have a little bit of a fun day today. We're gonna stick with the theme of the Final Four because the Final Four has been set for number one teams. One of them's Auburn.
Basketball still going on. I thought it ended Saturday night.
Yeah. Unfortunately, one of them's Auburn's, but no disrespect out there. They're tough teams.
There's this interesting kind of dynamic when you look at this year in particular. There was no Cinderella team.
Nope.
And most of the pundits believe that NIL is the main reason for that. You look at some of the schools who could put together kind of that profile of a Cinderella story, and they typically had a lot of seniors, maybe some fifth-year seniors. Some talent that was developed and maybe overlooked by some of the larger schools, and they worked well as a team and could make a run into the tournament. And now you look at what NIL has done, and those guys are getting spotted very early, hopping into the transfer portal, cashing out, and they're moving to the big names. And so it's very similar to the world of business in that you have to have capital. If you want to compete, whether that is capital that you've brought in from the outside, that you've borrowed, that you've raised, or it's capital that you've generated internally inside the business by bootstrapping it, you have to have capital. And I think we're seeing that play out in college athletics as well. So there you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Final Four is going on, and hopefully everybody's bracket is somewhat intact. I believe I had Houston winning it all. And after watching Duke on Saturday night, I'm kind of hoping I would have picked Duke.
Yeah, they're tough, man. They're real tough, and they got one of the best players. Them and Auburn got the two dudes in the tournament.
Yeah, well, Florida's legit too, though. So, we'll see how it pans out. But nonetheless, and like Mike said, keeping with that topic of Final Four, we've got 4 mistakes that we see entrepreneurs make that can prevent them from playing for or winning a championship inside their business. So we're going to cover those 4. Let us know if you have others. We want to hear from you on that.
So real quick. All right. So these are the 4, and we'll touch on. Let me just list them though. Lack of analysis / understanding of your numbers, no forecast or planning, holding on to non-productive labor, and moving out of sales too soon, or no sales process. And Brandon, you know how we had gone to all these conferences, me and you pre-COVID, man, we went to a bunch of conferences.
Right.
And so everybody listening, me being a former military guy and especially one in the special ops community, I like to mock things. It's just it's a whole, sorry, it's just sarcasm, stuff like that just makes me laugh. I enjoy it. Anyways, you go to these conferences and they're, again, a lot of them are great. We saw some great speakers, but you always knew when someone was going to get up there, like they're going to have a book, right? They're going to have some graph, and it doesn't even have to be like you
need a pyramid. Like if you're really
good, dude, if you throw a pyramid up there and then people are in the crowd like patting each other like, oh my God, look at that, and then there'd be some sort of like ABC 1, 2, 3 or acronym or something that got everyone just to spice it up one last time. So anyways, we come out of these ones and I'm like, Brandon, I just found out the 4 A's of simple numbers. And I did this because people would ask, like, oh, what do you all bring to the table? And I'm like, I'm just like what they do at conferences. I'm on a conference stage tomorrow. I'm bringing up the 4 A's. Probably in a square because there's 4 of them. Or I'd figure out a way to get it into a pyramid, right? 3 on the sides, 1 in the middle. And it is analysis, alignment, action, and accountability, right? So we provide the analysis that company needs to obviously help them make better decisions, get aligned on the key numbers in their business, hoping that it spurs action, and then we're going to hold you accountable to it. And I just felt that what we're about to talk about is right in line with that. And not that we are the, gatekeepers of this, but there is an element of this that needs to happen in every organization, and we're going to talk about them today.
You ready to rock and roll?
Let's do it. Kick us
All
off.
right. So the first one, lack of analysis / understanding your numbers. And there's a lot of reasons for this, but at the end of the day, you have to know where you're at today. You got to have clarity around that. We talk a lot of times, especially with new clients that are coming on board, about the distortions that they may have in their data. Most of the time, they're not even aware of that, and there's story after story of times to where someone thought they were doing really well and they really weren't, or vice versa, thought that they were doing poorly and they really were, once you really kind of understand where the data's at. But it really kind of goes beyond just looking at the statement and seeing, okay, we're profitable, are we hitting target, those kind of things. It's being able to look at your data between what we'd call a formal review period or financial review. So let's just say after the end of the month. It's being able to track the activity of the business and what's going on between those data points. Because if, let's say we're meeting and discussing things with clients and it's the 18th of the month. Well, you've already had 2.5 weeks. The month is half gone by the time you look back at what you were doing last month. And we say, hey guys, you're running off the road. I mean, you're off in the ditch and we may not can get it out by that point in time. And so in a lot of businesses, you can track and look at things like labor efficiency every 2 weeks. You should know your capital position every 2 weeks. The ones that are really good at it, they're able to shrink it down, and they even can, it may not be all the way to labor efficiency, but they've got certain indicators that tell them on a daily or weekly basis, are we on track? And so it's that constant kind of slight adjustments to the wheel when you see things are getting a little bit off that you can make. And then you look at the worst case scenarios, and I don't ever look at it. I just kind of have a gut feel of what we got.
Check the bank account.
Yeah, we got cash in the bank, and the people say that things look good and that there's a pipeline, and so we're just going to keep moving forward. And it's like, well, cash can lie to you, because you may actually have done really well, and now you're reaping the cash reward of that, and things have slowed down. And we talked about this last week with a handful of clients. I'm yet to come across a sales team that gives a negative outlook in most cases. It is always, hey, we got something about to hit. Hey, I'm telling you what, next month, I believe they're moving forward with this large deal, or it's really starting to heat up now. We've gotten in, into Q1 is right behind us. Q2, people are ready to roll. And part of that's good because you want an optimistic sales team, but part of it's bad because I want to know not an inflated situation. I don't want a deflated situation. I want to know as best they can tell what is reality. And so being able to look forward, and we'll talk more about that with forecasting, but you gotta know your data and where you're at.
Absolutely. And let's segue into forecasting, because what I was going to say was, once you've known that stuff, now you get to know what the reaction is, right? So I pull this lever, or this lever is having an issue over here. If I fix it, if it keeps having an issue, what is going to be the result over here? And so, I lift weights, I get stronger or in better shape. And the same goes with your business. Hey, I got a sector of my business that had prices increased on it. We are losing margin. How do I fix that? What do I do? And then what does it look like over here? How does it affect the rest of the business? And I think it's one thing. And when we go with it through our clients of going, hey, that's why in all of our initial kickoff sessions, whoever's been through one, we always start off with past through current. Where have you been? What are these levers that you're doing? Because we want to get into now, what is the impact as I pull them and it moves forward? When I manipulate them in some way, positive or negative, if it keeps happening, what's going to be the planned outcome over here? And so I think that segues right into that forecasting piece of now that we're getting into knowing it, what do we do with it, and what's the result going to be?
So Mike mentioned, as we're working with new clients and kind of getting their hands around that part, one other thing we do is we have what we call a financial IQ spectrum. Now, this is not an IQ spectrum. It's a financial IQ spectrum, okay? And what we basically do is that we look and you can get a lot of a feel, you might say, as to what understanding do they have of their data, what understanding do they have of their business model, of the key levers they need to pull, and where they're going. And as we kind of look at that financial spectrum or that financial IQ spectrum, one of the things that we look on it is those that are in the most advanced category, they always are able to look ahead and forecast. Now, you may be in a business environment. Let's take retail, for example, or a restaurant, to where it's like, how am I going to know who's going to come to our site and click, or walk in our store and buy, or, visit the restaurant? Well, there's leading indicators that are going to give you some idea. You can look and see, what was it same time last year? This week last year, what were we doing? Was it an up week or a down week with things like door swings or visits, or, whatever it may be there that you're trying to get the detailed information on? Comparing that to what your team is telling you, comparing that to what you're hearing is going on in the overall general environment of your industry and business. And so you kind of can pick together the pieces, and nobody's going to be perfect when it comes to forecasting, but you want to have a general idea where it's moving. And those that are the absolute best at it, you look for the patterns that we see on calls with these clients, and either the owner of the business or whoever is, depending upon the size of the business, they may have someone else at that point in time who's responsible for sales. We get to the forecasting section and they know, okay, I got to give the next 2 to 3 months of what we're expecting, and it needs to be as realistic as possible. And they have the number ready. We plug it in, and that's really important, especially when things are a little volatile. And I would say volatility has continued from 24 into 25, and it's likely going to stick around for a while. And so as folks are looking at things like hiring decisions, one of the best kind of rhythms that we have seen is, do you have 3 months of solid performance in the past? And can you look ahead and see at least 3 months of good performance moving forward? And if you can see those two data points, then most of the time it's okay to pull the trigger and move forward with a hire. But if you can't see the 3 months ahead, or at least have an idea of where it's moving, that increases your risk on the hire substantially.
I think you got to look at, in addition to that, is all good stuff. Or what does prior year at that time look like? Like you said, what does it look like for last year? Current trends, any seasonality, and then what have you done maybe from a marketing perspective that maybe you're used to doing that sales come in afterwards. Now, you don't bat 1,000 all the time, but if you know that, hey, we ran, I'm just throwing this out there, an ad campaign, and we know that typically we run an ad campaign within 30 days, we're going to get X amount back to us. That could be another thing too that sort of leads you in on where you might end up from a forecasting perspective.
I mean, many businesses have what we call the cookbook, right? Of, I need this amount of outbound activity to generate this amount of leads, to have this many phone calls, to get this many proposals, to get this many closes, to move forward. And so, as you're tracking the steps in that cookbook, that should give you a general idea of where things are moving here over the next month or two. I mean, if you look at it and you're like, hey, lead flow's down 30% from last year, I'm probably not going to beat last year. It's barring a home run, it's pretty evident where things are going. And so you want to be as realistic as possible there. And then along with that, we said the planning component. So Mike, how many clients do you have in the months of end of October, beginning of November, and going into December? They start pinging going, hey, we need to work on our plan for next year.
Yep. That's our highest planning session time. I mean, we'll do 100 or so planning sessions a year. 30% of them will most likely come in that last quarter.
How many do we have that in May, June, July start going, we need to make sure that we're on target with plan, and or reevaluate the plan and make adjustments?
AKA our lowest time of the year.
And so if you follow the normal thinking when it comes to planning, it is, we put together an annual plan. Nothing wrong with this, by the way, but there's some holes, right? We put together an annual plan. We have it set beginning January 1 and ending December 31st. And then, we put our heads down and start working. Well, when you think in rolling 12 data and rolling 12 time periods, you can come up for air and kind of look and see, are we on course or not? And if not, let's reset course. And instead of it being, hey, it's a lost cause this year. We're halfway through. We're never going to make it. Reestablish what it should be 12 months from today. So you're never just falling into that trap of we're not going to hit it. Let's just finish out the year and see what happens. You're always adjusting and pushing. What am I going to be doing 12 months from today? And then you get three more months down the road. What am I doing 12 months from then? And with the rolling 12 data, you can always look at that and determine where you're at.
Yeah, it really stinks that the calendar year has sort of made everyone think that there's an end to it.
Yeah.
And it's like it only ends until you sell or exit. Why is December 31st like the end? I mean, it may be the end from a tax perspective, but other than that, I mean, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Number 3, we held. Okay, this is good because we hold on to Brandon. So holding on to non-productive labor, always a killer. Forever will be.
Yeah, and part of this is the human element, and that is not fun whenever you have to have the conversation that someone is not performing and they're going to get to go be an A player somewhere else. The biggest thing too that we see there is what we call buying hope, and hope is getting and has been very expensive. And so they may not be a bad underperforming team member. You just might not be at the level of activity where you need that excess labor.
Yep.
And I can't tell you the number of times to where it's like, guys, we need to make an adjustment. Capital starting, we can see the beginning of the end of capital here. It's getting tight, or you're burning through a lot of cash that we don't need to burn through. We need to make an adjustment. And it's about to get better. I think it's going to be better next month. And you get on the call. I think it's going to be better the next month. And then you get 4 or 5 months down the road and you go, man, that was $100,000 that we no longer have. And you never get that back. So you have, and I think 25 is going to be one of these environments. Sure. Hopefully it's going to be better as we're going through. It looks better than 24, but it's definitely still an environment where you have to be profitable with what you have. And, as we say, sometimes it's easy to have the cousin Eddie job that folks are holding out for a management position and they're not super busy, but they look busy. I'll promise you this. They look busy, but are they really productive? I'm going to throw in an Alabama football reference here.
Here we go.
I'm sure everybody was, as we like to say at Mastermind, did you have that on your bingo card? Great coach, great man, University of Alabama, named Gene Stallings. One of his key things was never confuse activity with accomplishment. And it's real easy to do that whenever you look at labor. There's a lot of activity, but is there accomplishment? And to be fair to that person, if you haven't defined what accomplishment looks like, you can't hold them accountable. But yeah, we got to move forward. I just see way too many times to where labor's not productive, even in profitable companies.
And where do you think, Brandon, people get, I'll tell you my answer after you answer this. Where do you think people get in trouble and why they do add excess labor and maybe times when they shouldn't?
Well, part of it is you got to look a little bit back at kind of the history of that business in particular. So let's take a business that started in 2009. Well, I mean, from 2009 to 2022, we had a phenomenal business climate and an excellent run rate. We were also starting to experience the labor shortage. I mean, 2019 is when all of our data shows that we kind of started hitting those labor shortage issues, which is pre-COVID, right? And so they were in an environment to where you needed to hire ahead of the curve, because if you didn't, you would not be able to deliver. And then things shift in 2022, into 22, coming into 23, to where the market is no longer expanding and growing. And you either hired ahead of the curve and you haven't let them go, or you're so used to that environment that your hiring speed is faster than your ability to generate margin dollars. And so, I think a little bit of it is just kind of based upon how that rhythm that used to exist has been changed. Folks adapting to that. There are other cases. I don't see these quite as often, but every now and then I'll come across a case to where folks will say, well, just kind of part of our culture. We've never had a layoff. We don't reduce staff. And I mean, it's your business. You can do that, but just know what the consequence is of doing that. Like I said, that's only a handful of times. Then the third thing is just the human element, to where it's like, they're a good person. They do a good, they show up every day. They work hard, but are they working on the right things? And at the end of the day, can we afford to keep them?
I agree with all those, and I will add this. I believe that understanding the activity of the roles in your company and the jobs they're doing, and I think as you grow, it gets further away from you. But I'll give everyone an example. If I went and polled our accounting team on the 1st through the 15th, and I said, "Hey, do you all need another team member?" Oh my gosh, they need another team member. Why? Because they're closing the books. But once their time when the majority of those books get closed, the work evens out and they smooth out. And if you ask them during that time, I'm like maybe like the 25th of the month, hey, you all need another team member? Oh no, we're good. We're totally fine. Well, what I'm trying to say is that a lot of times in organizations, things get busy and people are like, oh, we got to add labor. I need somebody else. We're drowning. We can't do it. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen. So I don't want to hear in the chat. But I want to say that oftentimes, sometimes it's a poor process or just the way the work flows within the organization, or like Brandon said, sometimes maybe the right person just isn't in the right spot to do it. But what I do is I at least when I talk to my clients, I'm like, hey, if we look to make sure that this isn't just I'm throwing labor at a poor process to make it better, or is it hey, we actually do need someone.
Right.
And once you have that, and I think a lot of businesses, as they grow and they're busy and they're working on 4 million things, and they're like, they listen to their team and they're just like, we need somebody. Go, okay, fine, hire them. And it's like, whoa. You might have just jumped the gun there when we didn't need to. And, Brandon, one thing I've always appreciated about Greg Crabtree is he, as much as I think he trusts me and Brandon with things, he still doesn't let us just walk up to him and be like, oh man, we just want to hire somebody. I mean, we gotta show us.
The same conversation we have with our clients.
Yeah.
Why do we need them? What kind of return are we going to get? What's it going to do to our LER?
Yep, that's right. And so we obviously have it planned out a little bit better now over the years, or we have everything already ready, and we know what we need to present to him to show. But I encourage you all to have leaders in your organization and process the organization to say, hey, if we're going to bring on the next hire, here's why. Tell me why, and we'll look at it from that standpoint.
So I want to give you the number to look at when it comes to holding on to non-productive labor. If you have had 3 consecutive R12 periods to where your total LER is declining, you need to pay close attention. That's kind of, 1 could be an anomaly. 2, we're probably seeing something materialize. If you got 3 in a row, that's telling you I need to evaluate this. And then back to what we started the call with, or the second point, which was forecasting. What can I forecast the next couple of months? And then what does that R12 total LER look like? And if it's continuing to go down, you've got a big red flag being waved in front of you saying, we need to evaluate this, and it might be somebody's leaving and you just don't replace them. It might be that we have to change or flex our labor a little bit differently. Which once again, we'll talk about this maybe on a future episode. It amazes me the number of folks who are completely happy, thrilled, and love not working 40 hours a week. It's there is a large portion of the population that's like, cool, I only have to work 32 this week. That's right, but I'm not going to pay you for those other 8. Oh, I'm cool with that. So being able to flex labor and make an adjustment, or, potentially depending upon what the outlook looks like and where things are at, I might have to make a move with the team. So yeah, look at that total LER. And if you see 3 in a row, that's your signal.
Yep, that's right. All right, Brandon, what's the last one? Bring us home.
Moving out of sales too soon. So I got to give a shout out here to our friend Alan Pence, who has the Small Business Mentor. If you're not subscribed to the Small Business Mentor, you need to go check out what Alan's put together there. Alan's done a great job of building a company, been very successful with it, even getting it to the point to where he does not have to be involved in the day-to-day operations. And so we were having some conversations about that process of, owner independence, you may call it. And one of the things that we see is that the owner tries to move out of sales way too soon. And I can promise you this, with rare exceptions, no one sells your company the way you sell your company. And from a customer's perspective, there's something to be said whenever you're speaking with the owner. And so as you kind of look at the size of your company, general rule of thumb, if you're less than $5 million, you may not make every sale, but you better own sales. You've got to oversee it. You got to make sure that you're coaching the team, that you're responsible for it. You don't want surprises. You know, if you're a $2.5 million company and you don't know where sales are going, you need to step up your game there. Also, not having a sales process. So, Mike, where do you think the sales process for most businesses lives?
Usually in someone's brain.
Ah, bingo. It is in someone's head. It is either in the head of the entrepreneur, which is typically the case, or it's, you know, if you've got a high performing salesperson, it's in their head. And that makes it really difficult as you try to grow and expand that team, because they don't know what to do to sell inside your organization. They can be the best salesperson in the world, but if there's no process of how you do it, or that process hasn't been documented, it's going to make it hard for them. And that's why we really like this concept of what we call the sales admin. When you look at a majority of sales activity, it is administrative in nature. I mean, you kind of look at the actual closing of the deal relative to all the time spent on all the other things, sales, and that takes someone's time when it comes to sales. Closing is a small percentage of the time. And so we like having a sales admin that is going to take care of all the things from booking the appointment, setting up the call, scheduling the travel if needed, making sure the presentation's ready, working through the proposal, sending the final copies and the drafts, scheduling the follow-ups, all those kind of things. And in doing so, that person can help create the sales process. And if you do a really good job of it, within a couple of years of being in that sales admin role, they're likely ready to move into a sales position. And they know it frontwards and backwards because they started at the ground level.
Absolutely. You've been trying to get our sales process out of my head for years.
Yes, and that is like pulling teeth from an alligator. Hey, and lesson learned with that one. When all else fails, we can always serve as a bad example. This is one of our favorite things. The first time you go about doing it, it's probably not going to work real smoothly, you know? So we'll pick on Mike a little bit here for an example. So Mike has a great sales process that has resided in Mike's head for a long time. And as we have put that process onto paper and into action, what we have found is that the first time or two we've done it, it hasn't been very smooth. And a lot of that's because we overcomplicated the process. You know, we did everything right, but send the invoice, which is fairly important. Or we sent the invoice and we missed the other components to make sure they were set up and the initial engagement was scheduled. So nonetheless, you know, it may not go smoothly at first, but you just kind of have to keep at it.
But it worked. It worked when it was in here, Brandon.
It worked in there. An unfortunate thing is we can't scale it when it's in Mike's head.
That's right.
Which is also a very dangerous and dark place.
Yes. Oh, yeah. You don't want any of this. Well, awesome, man. Hey, that was a great one. Great conversation today. So, unless, do you have any closing thoughts for
one thing I want to throw out there? So we are working on, we've actually got the content built. We have the rhythm built for Simple Numbers Workshop. And so this is basically taking what we discuss with folks when it comes to the simple numbers process of everything from, like I said earlier, removing distortions in your data, to how profitable should I be, to the ins and outs of labor efficiency, how I calculate it, how I move it, to discussing capital and what level of capital should I have, and what are the moves that I can make to change my trade capital signature, all of those kind of things. We've got a workshop built that would be 4 sessions, and it will be done. We're going to limit the group size. So we're looking at having no more than 8 to 10 companies involved at any time, so that we can do have a little bit more special attention to each person that's in the group. It'll be an online workshop. And so if you're interested in that, please contact us, because we're right now starting to put together what that list is going to look like, likely going to kick off in May. So you got about a month. It's the beginning of April here. If you're interested, to let us know. You can reach us both on LinkedIn. You also can go to our website. Email addresses are out there as well. Just shoot us an email if you're interested. We'll get you some more material on that. But we're going to mention that a couple more times because we're building that class for that workshop.
Awesome. Sweet. And yeah, like I said, reach out. Hope to see some of you there. Well, that's it for us. We'll be back. Stay tuned. We're going to be bringing on some guests, trying to get some dates nailed down, some more guests. We really enjoyed the guest content. Got a lot of good feedback on it.
Yep.
We got some exciting entrepreneurs coming up, and a lot of cool things happening within our client base and with others we're connected to. So, for Brandon Gray, I'm Mike Maxson, and we'll catch y'all next week.
See y'all.
If you want to know more about driving sustainable profitability for your business or are interested in learning more about CRI Simple Numbers, please visit our website at simplenumberscri.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of Profitability Playbook, the Simple Numbers Podcast. You can subscribe to Profitability Playbook on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. If you liked what you heard today, please leave us a review. The views expressed on Profitability Playbook, the Simple Numbers Podcast, are those of the presenter and moderator and do not necessarily reflect the views of CRI Simple Numbers or the CRI family of companies. This podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional advice received directly. Consult with your CRI Simple Numbers advisor or another trusted professional if you have questions about your specific situation.